My name is Samantha. I'm 20 years old, and I work at a Walmart in a small town called Jackson, Alabama. Since I'm not in school full-time, my boss would often put me on overnight shifts, back when the store was open 24 hours a day. Being a supercenter, there were still a handful of employees working through the night. A couple of cashiers up front, and a few of us in the back doing stocking work. The store sits out in the countryside, so at those insane hours of the night, there wasn't much business. It was quiet, almost too quiet, but it was also prime time for restocking. That night, my shift ran from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. I didn't really know the other employees on shift with me, but in a place as massive as this, it's easy to go hours without seeing another soul. I started my night in the men's department, folding stacks of pants and tidying up shelves. I kept my earbuds in because, let's face it, there wasn't anyone around to tell me not to. It was around 11:30 p.m. when a customer walked into the jeans section. It wasn't unusual to see people trickle in and shop until midnight. The man came up to me and asked if we had any more of the specific pants he found in a different waist size. I smiled and apologized, saying only whatever was on the rack was what we had. He nodded, thanked me politely, and walked away. I glanced up for a split second and made awkward eye contact as he stood near the rack, putting the jeans back. It was one of those fleeting moments you forget about almost instantly. But I didn't know at the time that I'd remember everything about this man later. As the night dragged on, the store started to feel like a ghost town. No customers, no employees in sight. Just me and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights. It must have been around 1 a.m. when I moved over to the appliances section. I was hauling boxes back and forth from the stockroom and stacking coffee makers and toasters onto empty shelves. The aisle was dead silent except for the occasional clink of plastic or cardboard. That's when I noticed movement in the next aisle over. Through the gap in the empty shelves, I could see a man standing there, watching me. When he saw me notice him, he quickly turned his head. But I had already recognized his face. It was the same man from earlier. I felt a chill creep up my spine. How long had he been in the store? Why was he just standing there empty-handed? I pushed my cart forward and walked past the next aisle to get a better look. Sure enough, his hands were completely empty. No way could someone be shopping for over 2 hours and not pick up a single thing. Something about it didn't sit right with me. I quickly finished stocking the appliances and rolled the empty cart back to the stockroom. I decided to take a short break in the employee lounge, scrolling on my phone to calm my nerves. Part of me thought I was overreacting, but the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. After a while, I decided to avoid the appliance section altogether and headed for the grocery area to stock dairy products. I wheeled crates of milk, yogurt, and cheese into the dairy cooler and began organizing them on the shelves. The steady hum of the refrigerators filled the air, drowning out nearly all other sounds. That's when the cooler door burst open. I froze. There was a small gap in the stacked crates that let me peek through, and my blood turned cold. It was him, the same man, standing there in the employee-only section like he belonged. My heart pounded as I ducked down and crawled behind a pallet. I grabbed a heavy box filled with cartons of eggs and pulled it in front of me, praying it would block his view. The roar of the refrigerators masked any noise I made as I held my breath, waiting. Minutes felt like hours. I kept expecting to hear the cooler door open and close again, but it didn't. Finally, I gathered enough courage to lift my head and peek over the box. And that's when I saw him. He was standing right there, just on the other side of the box, grinning down at me. That smile vanished as soon as I screamed. He lunged forward and tried to clamp his hand over my mouth, but I fought back. I shoved the heavy box of eggs into him, sending cartons tumbling to the floor and cracking open. As he stumbled backward, I bolted. I ran out of the cooler as fast as I could and didn't stop until I spotted another employee stocking shelves. "Help me," I gasped. "His name Tag," said Ben. Before I could explain, the man from the cooler came walking up behind me. His expression had changed, calm, almost professional. "I'm so sorry," he said smoothly. "I'm from corporate. I was just checking on things to make sure everything was running smoothly." Ben seemed to buy it without question. But I didn't. Why were you in the employee cooler? I demanded. And why did you put your hand over my mouth? The man replied casually. I didn't want to cause a scene. I was only trying to make sure you weren't slacking off. Then, as if nothing had happened, he ordered me to finish stocking the appliance section and walked away briskly. What's your name? I called after him. Tom, he said without looking back. And then he was gone. The next morning, I called my manager, Margaret, and told her everything. She was horrified. She checked the records and confirmed there was no scheduled visit from corporate that night, and no one named Tom worked for the company. She reviewed the security footage, and her face went pale. The cameras showed the man wandering through the aisles, stalking me for hours. A police report was filed immediately. After that, I told Margaret I couldn't do overnight shifts anymore. She understood completely. To this day, I still work at that Walmart, but only during daylight hours. And I'll never forget that smile in the cooler. What's one place you can go to and find some of the weirdest, freakiest creatures in our society? I swear, I've never been to a single Walmart where I didn't see at least one eye-catchingly strange human being. But strange doesn't even begin to describe what I'm about to tell you. It was the Thursday before Black Friday. My local Walmart was staying open extra late for all the early shoppers trying to snag deals. It was around 11 o'clock at night, and I was there looking for a new laptop. By sheer luck, I grabbed the last one on the shelf, the one being promoted for a ridiculously good Black Friday deal. But as soon as I picked it up, this huge, filthy-looking man came stumbling over to me. His clothes were tattered and grimy, his hair matted, and he smelled like he hadn't showered in weeks. He stared at me with these wild eyes and growled, I need that laptop. Hand it over. My heart skipped a beat. I nervously shook my head and stammered, I'm sorry, this is the last one. That's when his face twisted into anger, and he started yelling at me in the middle of the electronics aisle. I felt every eye in the store turn toward us as he ranted and raved, his voice booming across the empty aisles. This guy clearly wasn't normal, and my hands began to tremble as I clutched the laptop box tighter. I quickly turned and walked away, heading straight for the checkout lines. Behind me, I could hear him shouting curses and threats as I hurried to get away. It was unbelievable. A few other customers in line tried to lighten the mood by joking about the guy, saying things like, he's a nut, don't worry about him. But I couldn't shake the unease in my chest. I paid for the laptop as quickly as I could and left the store without looking back. When I got home, the house was dark and quiet. My family was already asleep. I decided to sit out in the backyard by the pool to set up my new laptop and enjoy the cool night air. But as I was typing away, the motion sensor light on the side of the house suddenly flicked on. I froze. Sometimes animals from the woods nearby would wander onto the property and trigger it, so I tried to brush it off. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. I stood up and cautiously walked over to check, scanning the side yard. Nothing. But just to be safe, I went back inside, locked the doors, and moved to the living room to finish setting up my laptop. Not even 10 minutes later, the piercing sound of my car alarm went off outside. My heart jumped into my throat as I recognized the sound. It was my Cadillac. I ran upstairs for my keys and tried pressing the panic button to shut it off from inside the house, but it didn't work. Reluctantly, I stepped out onto the porch and clicked the button again. The alarm stopped, but something caught my eye. There was a car parked on the street in front of my house, a car that hadn't been there when I got home earlier. In our neighborhood, that was strange. We live in a quiet, closed-off community where every house has a big driveway. Nobody parks on the street unless they're up to something. I stepped off the porch to get a better look, and that's when I noticed it. There was someone sitting inside the car. A cold chill ran through my body. I quickly retreated back inside, locking the door behind me, and went straight to my mom's room. "Mom, I think someone's outside," I whispered, my voice shaking. My mom and dad have a complicated situation, so he doesn't always stay with us. It would have been a completely different story if my dad had been there. My mom followed me downstairs, her face pale with worry. She peeked through the peephole on the front door, and immediately gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. I looked too, and my stomach dropped. Standing on the porch was the same huge, filthy man from Walmart. He was grinning. I whispered to my mom, "It's him. He must have followed me home." Before we could do anything, the doorknob began to turn. When it didn't budge, he started pounding on the door, loud, violent thuds that made the wood shudder. My mom let out a choked sob, and my younger sister came out of her room, panic spreading across her face as she realized what was happening. Then suddenly, silence, except for the sound of my mom's trembling voice as she spoke to the 911 dispatcher. We all stood frozen, waiting for the next sound. And then it came, a deafening crash from the den downstairs. The sound of shattering glass. My mom and sister screamed as I bolted to the den and slammed the door shut, locking it. I pressed my back against it, heart hammering, waiting for him to try the door. But nothing came, just silence. And then sirens. A police car pulled up outside, its lights flashing red and blue across the windows. It was the fastest response time I'd ever witnessed. I ran outside and waved the officers toward the den. When they entered, they found the man crouched behind one of our couches. He was arrested on the spot, screaming profanities and threats at me as they dragged him out in cuffs. The officers told us the man seemed unstable and probably high on drugs. They assured us he wouldn't be bothering us again. But even now, I can't shake the image of his wild eyes staring at me through that peephole. So next time you're people watching at Walmart and laughing at all the goofy characters you see, remember, you might just cross paths with someone far more dangerous than you realize. Working the night shift at Walmart on the weekends wasn't exactly glamorous, but it was my second job while I was trying to finish up college. I needed the money to pay off my loans, so I took whatever work I could get. As a night stock person, I didn't really deal with customers, thank God. Most of my time was spent signing for night deliveries, unloading pallets in the warehouse, and stocking shelves throughout the store while it was closed to the public. The typical shift ran from either 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., or sometimes midnight to 7. I still remember the date because it's burned into my brain. It was Thursday, July 9th, 2015. That night, I was midway through my shift, working in the electronics department. That's when I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, someone walked past the aisle I was working in. Now, this normally wouldn't have caught my attention, except for one thing. There were only two other workers in the entire building that night, Trevor and Malik. We'd all clocked in at the same time earlier, and they were both wearing the same blue staff shirts I had on. But the figure I saw, they were dressed in all black. Something about it made my stomach twist. Cautiously, I walked to the end of the aisle and peeked around the corner. The space was empty. "Trevor? Malik?" I called out. No answer. That made it worse somehow. I shook it off, telling myself I was probably imagining things. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I kept working, shelving phone cases and accessories, tried to ignore the creeping unease in my chest. A few minutes later, I felt the urge to use the bathroom, but decided I'd hold it until I finished this aisle. And then, bang, a loud crash echoed from a few aisles down. I jumped, my heart pounding in my ears. Dropping what I was holding, I hurried toward the sound and saw a bicycle lying on the floor. It had been knocked clean off its hook, but the hook itself, still perfectly in place. Someone would have had to tug hard to make that bike fall. I rehung the bike and started walking around the nearby aisles, scanning for movement. The store felt too quiet, too still. When I reached the back of the store, in the cleaning supplies aisle, I froze. There was a sound, a laugh. It was faint but chilling, high-pitched and unnatural. It came from the next aisle over. I slowly crept forward and peeked around the corner. My stomach dropped. Standing at the far end of the aisle was a man dressed head to toe in black. He wasn't facing me completely, but his head was turned just enough that I could see part of his face. One eye, a twisted smirk. And then he bolted, not toward me, but across the aisle and out of sight. I could hear his footsteps pounding against the floor. For a moment, I froze. Should I chase him or find Trevor and Malik. My instinct screamed at me to find the others. I took off in the other direction, my pulse racing, the sound of eerie laughter echoing faintly behind me. It felt like it was circling me, moving from aisle to aisle, always just out of sight. Finally, I found Trevor in the women's clothing department. "There's someone in the building," I blurted out. "He's dressed in black. He's not supposed to be here." Trevor's expression darkened. "Seriously? There's no security on shift tonight either." I asked him to warn Malik if he ran into him. But first, I couldn't hold it anymore. I needed the bathroom. I hurried back to the employee-only restroom near the warehouse, my nerves on fire. Once inside, I sat down in a stall after carefully covering the seat with toilet paper. Yeah, I'm one of those people. Then I heard it. The bathroom door creaked open. "Trevor? Malik?" I called out nervously. No reply. Instead, I heard the laugh again. It was louder now, closer. Through the narrow crack in the stall door, I saw movement. An eye appeared, staring straight at me. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The man in black leaned closer, until all I could see was that single eye. Then came the whispering. Soft, unintelligible words that seemed to echo off the cold bathroom tiles. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking. Thank God I had Trevor's number saved. I dialed and spoke loudly, hoping the man would hear. "Trevor, get to the bathroom right now. Hurry." The eye vanished. I heard footsteps, then the bathroom door swinging open and shut. "Please, Trevor," I whispered into the phone. "Hurry." About 30 seconds later, Trevor burst into the bathroom, his eyes wide. "I didn't see anyone," he said breathlessly. I stayed glued to Trevor's side for the rest of the night, helping in whatever aisle he was working in. Safety in numbers, right? When my shift ended, I texted my boss about what happened. Later that afternoon, I woke up to a reply. He said all the security camera feeds from the night before had been wiped, just static footage. No one went back there to turn them off, he wrote. A chill ran through me. He believed me. But with no video evidence of a break-in, there wasn't much anyone could do. That was the only night shift I ever worked where something truly unexplainable happened. And it's the reason I've never stepped foot in a Walmart after dark again.